So it's Saturday morning, and we're having a conversation about the pandemic happening around the world. Um, it's like it's been how many months now? Like two months, 8 weeks,
Really, it started in January,
December. Yeah,
and we kind of got word of it in February, and by March, some things. I think the end of March is when they started the lockdown,
yeah.
and then since then,
It's been six
the
weeks.
real virus started spreading, man.
Oh
Oh
God,
my God! And it's a
the
human virus,
misinformation. Yeah,
which
it's scary.
I mean, I'm the king of conspiracy theories, and to be on the other side of this conspiracy theory is weird.
Do you uh, do you think that maybe in like a couple of years, maybe some information will come out where it shows that there was some tampering or anything, or no?
Not likely,
No.
not likely, because it didn't.
Right. Like you
I
said.
mean, pretty strong evidence right now that this was not man-made.
Yeah.
It wasn't genetically engineered. It wasn't released.
Yeah.
You
Do you think it'll
know,
be utilized to like collapse economies and some sort of like
it's
world
certainly not
domination game?
intentional.
Yeah.
That's collapsing the economy isn't in the rich people's best interests,
Right.
and
Yes.
that's why they're clamoring to get it going again. Everything was working just fine,
Yeah.
but it wasn't. It actually wasn't, and that's why this is happening.
Yeah. So what is your take on just like human health in general, and what viruses play a role in that?
Well, I think human health and earth health, and health
Yeah.
is all about balance. And when we see something that's out of balance, there's a reason for that. And so the root cause, has to be uncovered. So the reason for a human getting an infection is that they're susceptible. Otherwise, we've got an immune system, and as long as that immune system is working, we're alive. We're like a test tube.
So kind of what your natural defense is your immune system
Yeah.
towards everything. So how does the immune system work for people who
Well,
don't
it's
quite?
there's a single cellular organism, which is made up of one cell, like an amoeba.
Okay.
And then those evolved into a multicellular organism and humans.
Yeah.
And we have about 200 different kinds of tissue in
Yeah.
our human body. And all of those tissues have to be coordinated and unified into an individual. And so it's like a test tube. So membranes differentiate different tissue and allow different functions to occur in a multicellular organism. But we've got membranes around every cell in our body. So we've got membranes around our kidney cells, around our liver cells, around our heart cells.
Those
But we also,
membranes different looking than
membranes are
they're all the
really
same.
interesting. Well, they're made up of 2 layers of fat and 1 layer of protein.
Yeah.
So each one has, a membrane is sort of circular. And interestingly, the human membrane is the same as a plant membrane, which is also made up of this bilipid layer. And so it's 85% fat on the outside and the inside, and sandwiched in between those two fat layers is some protein. And when that protein changes shape, it opens up what are called these, ion channels. And it's like a pore, where things get into the cell and get out of the cell.
Yeah.
And when the proteins change shape, like a muscle changes shape and we move. So the proteins change shape and they open up that ion channel and things get in and out.
So that's your barrier.
Yeah. And on the cell membrane, there are receptors that see stuff floating by that they need. And so the receptor will tell the membrane to open up and then let stuff in that the cell needs. And then the cell also needs to expel waste from metabolism from life.
Yeah.
And that has to open up. Well, similarly, we have a skin.
Yeah.
and our skin is the biggest organ of the body.
Isn't it
But
second to the large or the small intestine or something?
oh no,
It's the number one.
yeah, skin is the largest organ in the body.
Okay.
And we've got a mouth, and we've got a nose, and we've got, orifices that allow, like our genital urinary, our respiratory tract, and that allows stuff to get into our body. But what you put in your mouth is not really inside your body. It's only inside your body when it's been broken down with the stomach and the intestines, and then those tiny particles are able to pass the intestinal wall, where they go into a big vein called the portal vein, which takes everything that's been digested into the liver first off. But if it's not completely broken down, so proteins have to be broken down into amino acids, fats have to be broken down into fatty acids, and carbohydrates need to be broken down into monosaccharides. And if they're not broken down, they can't get through the intestinal wall. So they then exit the body through the rectum, and that which was not broken down was never really inside the body. It's only when it gets through the intestinal wall, and if it happens correctly, it goes into your portal vein and into your liver. But today, because of illness and toxins, the intestinal wall is leaking in most human beings, and that allows undigested foods, bugs, and toxins that we drink or eat. It allows them into the body. Well, then the function of the antibodies is, and 90% of antibodies made in the human are in the mucus. So all of those orifices are lined with mucus, because that's where
Mucus is bacteria.
no, mucus is a tissue where antibodies live.
Okay.
And the function of an antibody is to recognize anything that's a foreign protein, which is called an antigen. And an antigen is a foreign protein that stimulates an antibody. And we can make 10,000 different kinds of antibodies to 10,000 different kinds of foreigners. So let's say, well, it's not likely. A virus is usually not transmitted orally, because the hydrochloric acid in the stomach kills it.
Okay.
And the COVID virus is transmitted through our nasal and through our eyes primarily. It's also found in the semen, which is interesting. So there's so much research being done. There's never been a disease that's been more researched than COVID-19.
Really?
I mean, it's just everybody is researching it right now. So that adds to the confusion of what people, because all the research isn't necessarily perfect the first time that it's published. So, but anyway, antibodies, their job is to attach themselves to a foreign protein in the body. And that is what then is called an immune complex. That immune complex is sent to the kidneys, where it's eliminated out through the urine. And that's how our body deals with foods, bugs, and toxins that have elicited an antibody response. Now, we have viruses in our gut, and we have bacteria, and we have fungus, and we have parasites. It's called the microbiome. And without that, we'd be very, very sick.
Because the world is full of these things.
Yeah, but so we have our friendly bacteria, it's called, right? And we have what's called oral tolerance to that, where we don't attack it. When you start attacking your friendly bacteria, that's called Crohn's disease.
Oh, Crohn's.
Yeah, and bad news. It's one of the worst intestinal diseases there is, when you start attacking your own bacteria. So, and think about, food is a foreigner too. It's not human.
Funny. Yeah.
But we make human from food, and we have what's called oral tolerance. So we don't attack our food. The reason why we attack food, that's called the food sensitivity. And that's because food which hasn't been completely digested leaks through the gut, and instead of going into the portal vein and into the liver, it goes into the abdomen, where then lymph system and capillaries absorb what's leaked into the body through the intestine, because it wasn't completely digested, and then we attack it. And we create an antibody against that food, bug, or toxin. The antibody attracts the foreigner to it, it locks it up, goes to the kidney, and it's eliminated through the urine. All kidney diseases is because there's too many of those immune complexes. It's called antigen penetration. Antigen, again, is a foreigner that gets into the body. And if the biggest interaction that the human has with with our external world is what we put in our mouth. So it's not rubs our skin or necessarily what we breathe, but we put in about 1.5 pounds of food. And in that food, there can be toxins, there can be bugs, as well as food. And if that food is not being properly digested and it's leaking into the body and we're producing immune complexes, there's too many of them for the kidneys to be able to get rid of. So they recirculate. And then what happens with food and a food sensitivity is that a complement hormone, which is a cellular hormone, identifies that immune complex to the other half of the immune system, which is the white blood cells. So there's two parts to the immune system. You got antibodies and you got white blood cells. When the antibodies are alerted to these immune complexes circling around because they're toxic, they should have been eliminated, but they couldn't, so they recirculated. Then white blood cells start to attack those immune complexes, and that initiates what's called the complement cascade. And the complement cascade results in inflammation. And inflammation is the biggest cause of tissue change in the human. And tissue change leads to disease. So that's where, as you know, I do food sensitivity testing. And I was privileged to meet and work with the immunologist that invented that, Dr. Ari Vojani. And he also invented this test called the intestinal barrier function test. That's how I got to know him, because I was working at a hormone lab.
Now that test really shows a lot of like how well your barrier is doing, or what does it do?
Yeah. It looks at antibodies against foods and bugs. And there's different kinds of antibodies. There's antibodies that are produced immediately when you get an infection. Then there's an antibody that starts in about 10 to 2 weeks after that infection. And then if that infection is long-term, there's an antibody for that chronic infection. So it's IgM, IgG, and IgA. And so that test that Dr. Vojani invented looked at those 3 types of antibodies against 5 dietary proteins, like egg and milk and wheat and soy and sugar or something like that, forget. And it looked at 3 aerobic bacteria, 3 anaerobic bacteria, and 3 different kinds of species of yeast.
Is this the original test?
Yeah, and they're still
being used.
And by cross-correlating all the data that you got from there's about 21 different interactions between the 3 different kinds of antibodies, the dietary proteins, the 2 different kinds of bacteria, and the yeast, you could see if there was an autoimmunity or if there was immunodeficiency. Autoimmunity is when the immune system is attacking itself. Immunodeficiency is something like AIDS, where the antibodies are debilitated. You could see if there was a yeast infection, candidiasis. You could see if there was dysbiosis, an infection of bacteria. And you could see if there was a food sensitivity. So from that one test, you were able to tell a lot of information. And I got to interpret probably over 500 of those tests over a year's period. And Vojani taught me all about this. But the most important thing that Vojani taught me was that the biggest toxin that the human has to deal with is if they start to attack their food. The reason is because food is our biggest interaction with our external world.
So how does that start? How would the body turn from a good digestive tract into starting to attack its own food?
From antibiotics, from a C-section. A C-section is the start of a problem, because with a C-section, the baby is taken out of the womb through the stomach, through the abdomen.
So you don't have the natural. Yeah.
Yeah, with the vaginal birth, you're exposed to the bugs because the baby inside a pregnant woman is sterile.
Uh,
So we
the
have to
first.
acquire immunity, right?
Yeah.
And that's why when you get infected with a virus or with a bacteria,
Yeah.
your body sees that bug, and of course, corona is a novel virus that
Novel
the
meaning
body
what? Like new
new
or
new
yeah.
yeah. There's body is our humans have never seen corona before. It's a mutation. There are lots of different coronaviruses, but this one was a new mutation.
It's
When
the
that
19th
happens,
mutation, right? Isn't it? Because of
well, no, that's 2019
oh,
is when it was
2019.
discovered.
Oh
But a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people think that.
Well,
That's
isn't there are a lot of mutations, right? Like SARS is a mutation. This is like a
yeah,
mutation of that. Like
yeah.
yeah.
And viruses mutate, and viruses live inside of us. But some of them are toxic, and like some, you can
Are
get bit by.
creating toxins
Well,
just
they're
by the way that
toxic, and they're harmful. So the immune system, when it sees a foreigner and it starts to produce antibodies, that's called acquired immunity. And it takes about 10 to 14 days for the body to start building up antibodies against a new virus that it sees.
it has to create.
Once,
Yeah.
once you've created that overwhelming response to the virus, and the body is hopefully able to kill it, then a memory cell of that antibody is stored in your lymph nodes. And so the next time in 2 months, when your body sees that virus, instead of it taking 2 weeks to build up your response to it, your body starts to produce tens of thousands of antibodies instantly. So you don't have to go through that 2-week period of developing your immunity to it. And that's the big controversy now, is that it's not clear once you've been exposed to corona and you build up antibodies to it, how long that acquired immunity lasts. Like with the common influenza, it's a year or two. With other things like measles or polio, it can be a lifetime. So the research isn't quite clear yet as to whether or not being exposed to corona once is going to give you immunity for how long.
Because of our body or because of the virus?
It's just everything is different.
Yeah.
Every virus is different.
Yeah.
So, but that's the two parts of the immune system: antibodies against foreigners, and then white blood cells against toxins and debris. And that's the two parts of the immune system. You can tell how that's working when you do a complete blood count and you look at the number of white blood cells, and then there's subsets of white blood cells. So there's basophils and eosinophils and neutrophils and lymphocytes. And when you do a test, you look at the total white blood cell count, then you look at all those subsets. And you can tell if there's a bacterial infection or a viral infection by looking at the total white blood cell count, but also looking at the neutrophils and the lymphocytes. And then basophils and eosinophils tells you more about allergies and toxins. So it's quite wonderful how a simple blood draw can tell you how your immune system is. So if somebody has a compromised immune system, let's say that they've got herpes, and so they're always producing antibodies against that herpes. And if our immune system is always having to fight something, it can get debilitated, and we start to lose, after a while, we start to be compromised. Because if we're fighting a virus or a bacteria and a new infection comes along, we
You're
might
already
not
depleted.
have we might not have the capacity to deal with that new infection. So what we want to do is to try to identify as many things that are stimulating an antibody production and reduce or eliminate our exposure to that. It's called antigen reduction therapy.
So in like a perfect world, what does that look like? as far as lifestyle goes?
Well, Vajani taught me that the biggest toxin that the human has to deal with is if we're attacking our food.
And that stems from a
Well,
compromised
that
like digestive tract.
from leaky gut, and leaky gut is because of C-sections and antibiotic use and pesticides in our foods, pesticides, insecticides, dyes,
So the
artificial flavors,
yeah.
processing. Industrialized food is tough on our gut.
So the modern world is basically with the way that we're feeding ourselves, and we're so antibacteria that we don't have the buildup of beneficial bacteria to defend ourselves. Is that kind of what's
Well,
going on?
and one dose of antibodies can change the bacterial composition in the microbiome for 50 years. Generally, by the time we're 2 or 3 and we're a healthy kid,
Are there
we've built up the normal flora of the microbiome, and that'll pretty much stay constant until we're about 50 years of old age. After 50, it starts to change. But there's about 3.5 pounds of friendly bacteria in the microbiome, just in our gut. We also have friendly bacteria lining our vascular system. We have it in our respiratory tract. We have it in a genital urinary tract. So the body has somewhere between 3.5 and maybe 5 pounds of bacteria that's part of our ecosystem.
in a perfect world?
And when that ecosystem is imbalanced, if we start losing the balance, they've identified a couple thousand different kinds of bugs that are part of that microbiome. And when they look at the genetic of it, they think there might be even 5,000 different kinds of bugs.
Mm.
And there's more of those individual bugs in our gut than there are human cells, 10 by a factor of 10. So we have 10 times more bugs in us than we have human cells. And interesting, the function of those bugs is that they reproduce quickly. Now, and they help us to genetically modify to our external world. It's how we adapt. It's how we've evolved evolutionarily. So they play a really, really important role. But what's interesting about a virus is a virus can't live outside of the human or animal cell or plant cell. It's a parasite. And so that's what is kind of interesting is that I was thinking about that this morning. The human is actually a parasite too. We can't live without the earth.
Mm.
So we're kind of a parasite too.
Yeah.
So they say, there's part of the controversy around viruses is like, do they really cause illness? And are they even alive? And are they even a problem? Because they're not really living. They have DNA and they have RNA, but they don't have a heart. They're not able to live like a bacteria kind of can live outside a while. A parasite can, but viruses are really dependent upon, they replicate inside of a cell.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the damage, is that they take over that cell and kill it. So that's kind of a problem for the overall body ecology. But there's controversy around what viruses are, what role they play. But they're part of our world, and as you know, we've talked about this before. They're part of plants, and viruses and bacteria are associated with roots, and they help to break down rocks into their tiniest little particles called ions, which then can be utilized to make plants and carbohydrate along with oxygen and sunlight. And so then and carbon dioxide actually. And then so that whole process of life as we know it is dependent upon the different viruses and bacteria in the world and in our bodies. So if everything is perfect, everything's healthy. I mean, that's the way it's evolved. If a
There are always though
human,
these like curveballs that get thrown in order to help like um, help you evolve, kind of like help the environment evolve and develop new skills. And like these viruses are constantly changing, adapting, like trying harder. And so it's like what pushes evolution in a way.
well, they're part of the evolutionary process, but when, just like if a human gets out of whack,
Yeah.
then the viruses become imbalanced and too great or too, you can have too much bacteria or too little bacteria. You can have too much, out of balance. Well, the earth is really also a living entity. And the reason why we've got corona and these pandemics is because the earth is unhealthy. Just like the reason a human gets a virus or a bacteria or cancer, that human is unhealthy. The earth now is unhealthy primarily because we've destroyed our forests. We used to have, when the earth was prime and primal, 50% of the continents were covered by forests. Now only 5%.
Yeah.
So when the
We've kind of
forests
lost
are,
our covering.
yeah, and it's called sustainability. And then we're using chemicals since oil was discovered 1850s or 1820s, in the middle of the 19th century. And then oil has been manufactured into over 6,000 different chemical compounds have been created that are completely unnatural and never were on the planet before.
And
So
now every
that's,
organism is having to learn how
and
to
and
deal with that stuff.
we're using antifungals, we're using antibacterials, we're using antibiotics, we're using Roundup, which kills bugs. And it not only kills bugs in the soil on the plants, but when we ingest it, it kills that microbiome. And that's why today people have the sensitivity to wheat, gluten sensitivity, and celiac. And a lot of these conditions, which were really rare, now are common. And
Because we're
it's
using
a
all
long,
these, yeah.
because our foods are contaminated, as well as the oceans, the rivers, and the forests, and our farmland. So we're destroying that natural balance. And when, like, the reason why the coronavirus is infected humans, it's an animal virus. And they estimate that there's 1.2 million viruses that animals have that haven't even been named. When the animals are stressed out, then their viruses proliferate. And when they take an animal and they destroy its habitat, and then they put it in a cage and they bring it into a market and they slaughter it for human consumption, then that animal is even more stressed out. And that's how these viruses are being transferred from animals to humans.
Mm-hmm. Wet markets.
Yeah. And so, that's the problem. So the reason for corona is habitat destruction and pollution. And then the reason why a human, it's interesting because, we've talked about how corona is not affecting young children like the Spanish influenza 100 years ago. That killed kids, a lot of them. This is affecting kids, but not as bad. And it seems that it's people with pre-existing conditions that are the most susceptible to this corona. But what you and I know, and what I've learned from doing the work that I've done in laboratory testing on humans, is that people think that they're healthy. They have no, quote, symptoms. They have no disease that can be that is detected by laboratory tests, but they have imbalances before they get the disease.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people that think they're healthy, if you were to do a very careful test, you would see that they aren't as healthy as they think.
Yeah.
So, but still, there are healthy young people in their 30s, quote, healthy, that seemingly are healthy, that are getting sick with corona and dying. So it's not just the old people. It's not just people with pre-existing conditions. There are healthy people. There's healthy nurses, healthy doctors, and healthy people that have gotten, corona and died. And that is troubling. The other thing that's different about corona versus just the influenza, the flu, is that you don't see people with the flu making doctors and nurses sick.
Oh,
The protection, you got to, and of course, we haven't had adequate protection for the doctors and nurses either. But generally, the flu season doesn't kill doctors and nurses that are taking care of sick people with flu. But this is different.
because no one has the antibodies to this.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we haven't had good protection in the hospitals. And so people, have been exposed that are, quote, healthy. But like I said, I know.
So what if you are healthy and you are exposed to the coronavirus?
Not much of a problem.
Nothing will happen.
Well, you might get sick,
But
like
not
you would with
as
like with the
dire.
flu. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Is it
again,
possible to be exposed to it and not contract it?
well, you'll produce antibodies to it because it's a foreigner. If your immune system is healthy, and that's the testing that they're doing now. There's two kinds of tests. There's polymerase chain reaction, where they're identifying the genetic code of the corona that's in your body,
Uh-huh.
and then there's antibody testing. And if you're testing with PCR, you can see that you're infected with it, but you don't know if your body has mounted a strong immune response to that, and you've got inferred immunity. Whereas testing for antibodies will tell you that you have developed acquired immunity to that particular virus. And there's a lot of tests that have not been proven as to their reliability.
Yeah.
And so there's been a real problem with not only test development, but also tests that have not been really proven to be accurate.
Accurate. Yeah. What do you think is going to unfold? What's your prediction for how this virus is going to play out?
The best that I'm able to see from researchers
Yeah.
is that they suspect that this might be a virus that is around for a very long time.
That continues to infect people really at a dangerous level.
Yeah. Generally, for herd immunity, you hear about that.
Yeah.
About 70% of the people have to have developed antibodies to it.
Right.
And then in general, society is less susceptible. There will be people that get it, but it won't be a pandemic or an epidemic.
Right. So right now the whole stay-at-home thing is to slow that infection rate down. Yet the infection rate is still going to continue. It's just whether or not it's going to flood the hospitals or not, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's if too many people got infected too quickly, we wouldn't have an adequate ability to keep those people alive.
For the people who are susceptible to getting really, really sick.
Yeah.
But not everyone is going to get, violently ill.
The majority aren't.
Yeah.
Probably 95% of the population isn't. But,
So,
that's still kind of tough on the 5% that is.
In a way, then that 5% is going to eventually get it anyways, kind of thing. Is that a real thing?
Yeah. And we're hoping to have a vaccine. And, I've worked with immunologists. One of the doctors that I worked with, Dr. Dorval, has the patent on the polio vaccination, which Dr. Salk invented it. And when that was invented, it caused a lot of polio. It caused about 50,000 cases of polio. So people are rightfully suspicious of vaccinations.
Yeah.
But it also, there are vaccinations for smallpox and for measles. And, it's not to say that those vaccinations haven't been improved. And since there has been controversy over the last 20 years, they have been improved quite a bit. They're not as toxic as they were. They're more effective. What's scary right now is that they're pushing to get one. And it might it might not be safe because,
Yeah.
you know, they're pushing so hard to try to create them. So I think you kind of got to be a little bit wary. But not all vaccinations. I mean, there are millions, billions of people that have had vaccinations, and it didn't kill them all. But there
But
are also
there are kids that,
lots,
yeah,
oh, billions of dollars have been paid out in damages to kids that have had vaccinations and had horrific responses to it. You know, Dr. Bojani doesn't think that any kid should have a vaccination before they're 2.
because
Dr.
that's, yeah,
Dorval doesn't think they should have a vaccination until they're 5, till their immune system is developed.
right.
So they believe that that is wrong.
Damaging. It's pretty damaging to inject all these viruses into a kid that doesn't have
And
any.
now they used to use live viruses. Now they're using dead viruses, or they're using pieces of the virus. But they also put a lot of other stuff in there, like mercury and aluminum, to cause your immune system to react. It's called an adjunct. And it's a toxin that is stimulating your immune system. But some of those have been a little bit too much. So, but and
for kids,
my feeling is that if you're unhealthy, then a vaccination can be dangerous. And so I believe that if you're going to get vaccinated, they should at least run some tests to see how your immune system is working. And if your immune system is compromised, either too little or too much, then you might want to reconsider that vaccination. And to me, if you're going to inject something into the body, you should at least do an examination of that person's chemistry.
Of that body.
Yeah.
People are just kind of treated as if everyone's doing the same thing in the medical profession, right? Like everyone's lifestyle is the same. And in actuality, some people are under more stress. Some people are nutritionally deficient, you know, diet, exercise, lifestyle, emotional environment is different throughout. And that has a huge effect on your overall health. Yeah. I mean, they've done studies with like monkeys up in the mountains, and the ones that are like are more connected and are higher up and get the better food. Like they live long lives and don't get sick. Whereas the animals that are, you know, lower on the totem pole and socioeconomically, like they get sick often, and they're not as robust, you know, because they're more stressed out.
So that's something that really drove me wild. You know, in the 90s, I started working in Tijuana clinics that were treating cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate to get a lot of referrals from a fellow that started a magazine called Alternative Medicine. And so I got lots of referrals of people that were sick. And my job was to triage those people with different doctors and different therapeutics in Tijuana.
Mm. I never knew what you were doing down there.
Huh?
I never really knew what you were doing down there.
Well, you came and lived with me.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't know Burton Goldberg. Yeah, you were finding the clinics for them to go to. Interesting.
And so, and after about 5 or 6 years of working with them, I started thinking kind of like what we were just talking about. Everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
And they were giving everybody with breast cancer pretty much the same treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody with prostate cancer, the same treatment. And I started questioning that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also started questioning why so many of these people with advanced cancers, like 9 out of 10, would tell me that they had never been sick.
I remember the first people that came to our clinic, and I forget their names exactly, but they had requested to open up a bottle of wine. And we kind of were like, okay, well, sure, we'll open this. We didn't have a wine opener. I think we used a drill, and we got wine all over the walls, and it was like a big scene. But it's a funny thing. It's like when you're sick, people just don't recognize that even when you have cancer, you still don't understand like what you're doing has.
Well, that I quit those clinics, and of course I worked at Saint Aviv. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that was going to be a fantastic opportunity.
I think it still is. Isn't Saint Aviv one of the best clinics in the world, kind of thing?
Not even. It's one of the worst. But Dr. Oz did a interview.
Yeah.
And before the corona, Saint Aviv, when you and I were working there, and when it got started, it never really got off the ground.
No.
It's not very good. But Dr. Oz.
Well, it just has all the bells and whistles. The clinic is there, but whether or not the therapies are good.
Or the doctors.
Well,
I was hired to hire the doctors and to develop the protocol, and they fired me because I
yeah.
wanted to hire doctors that were worth, $100,000 a month, and they wanted to hire doctors that they could pay $3,000 a month that knew nothing. They won. I lost. And I didn't want to compromise. When you got cancer, you can't lie to people. You can't tell them, that this is the greatest therapy and they're
Well,
going to get well.
that's your greatest, tool is like not compromising, and that.
So what happened was that I got a job at a hormone lab. That's why I started working with Bill Timmons in biohealth diagnostics in Point Loma in San Diego, because I wanted to see. I knew everybody was telling me, hey, I'm healthy and I got cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I knew about nutrition and detoxification, and I knew that you can't get sick if you're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to the lab and I started reviewing thousands of tests, all different kinds of tests. We were teaching doctors to do hormone therapy, but we were working with sick people. And so there were all sorts of tests. So I would call up the labs of the tests that were being run. I'd be trained by how to interpret those tests. So I interpreted everything from fatty acid tests to immunological tests to hormone tests to blood chemistry tests to stool tests. And what I saw, Stuart, was this. I saw that there was a pattern where people were getting used to being sick. They weren't healthy. And because most doctors only look at disease,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't look at the beginning stages of the disease. They wait for the disease to manifest in a tumor or chemistries that's out of range. I was taught to look at chemistries that are within normal range and see when they were approaching too high or too low, and to begin evasive action at that point. Because the way that disease develops, first it's perfect balance. That's
Mm-hmm.
called homeostasis. Then you get out of balance because we're making wrong choices. Out of balance eventually ends up in tissue change, which is disease. After you have tissue change, you get symptoms, but symptoms come really quite late in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And after symptoms, you get death. So the trick is to look at chemistries that are still within normal limits, but are out of balance.
So in a
And
perfect world though, like how do you even just prevent getting sick, or how do you prevent needing tests, or how do you go about your life in a constructive manner rather than like continuously falling off, the boat?
well, what I learned, the cause of disease is not genetics. It's usually not an exposure to a toxin. There could be times when you're exposed to lead or you're exposed to mercury or carbon monoxide and it'll kill you, or you get bit by a tick, you get bit by a toxic snake, so there are times when, something can kill you when you're healthy. But generally, if you're healthy, a disease is not, the symptoms of disease is useful as a diagnostic. So let's say you get an infection. What I've learned is that infection signifies that there's an imbalance in your body, but it's not usually caused by the infection. In fact, our bodies are wired for success. So is the planet. So is life. Everything tends to get better. And so if you have high blood pressure or high cholesterol or a yeast infection, that means there's a problem. But the high blood pressure, the high cholesterol, and the yeast is not the problem. It's actually the solution. And so if you have a yeast infection, killing the yeast with an antifungal doesn't correct what caused the yeast infection. Why did the yeast infection take hold? So that's called root cause. So by doing diagnostic testing and looking for subtle pre-disease results where you development of the disease, the pathogenesis of the disease. You look to see if things are in perfect balance. And now people can come in. I mean, when I was a chiropractor, people would bring in blood chemistries that were normal, but they had 10 different symptoms. And I learned how to read blood chemistries so that I would ask people that had a chemistry that was normal, that the doctor told them that there was nothing wrong with them. I'd say, let me do the analysis on your normal blood chemistry, and I'll tell you what's wrong with you. And by golly, they'd think that I was psychic. But it was because I learned to read chemistries differently than waiting for the chemistries to be out of range, or to have a mammogram that showed a tumor, or a CAT scan that showed, a cancer. So the ideal is that you do a blood chemistry, a comprehensive blood chemistry, and you know how to read it so that you can say, oh, your white blood cell count is fine, but your lymphocytes are high and your neutrophils are low. And that means you got a bacterial infection, or your neutrophils are high and your lymphocytes are low. It's probably a viral.
So all these effects are caused from inputs, right? Like the inputs, how you take care of yourself on a daily basis, and what are you doing? And then if you are failing somewhere, then you can look at where you're failing. But what is like what would like a perfect like daily routine look like that would prevent you from even having to go down the path of sickness?
Well, you eat organic foods. You don't live in a toxic environment where there's air pollution or water pollution.
So just mind you, like this is the modern world, and people are living amongst cities, and
most everybody is sick.
right.
Their health is compromised. But what you do is, the foods that we eat are macronutrients, which is protein, fats, and carbs, and micronutrients, which is water, vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. So a good blood chemistry, you look and you see, how are you handling those foods and micronutrients? Are you dehydrated? Do you have adequate digestive enzymes? Is your liver and gallbladder working? How's your immune system? Are you anemic? How's your protein level? How's your fat level? How's your sugar level? And if you see problems there, then you say, oh, you're developing diabetes.
Well, that means the digestive tract is not functioning properly, right?
Well, that's the root of most of the problems. But blood sugar control is you're eating excessive amounts of sugar and carbohydrates.
Right.
And it could be milk, it could be, popcorn, it could be wheat, it could be, candy bars, it could be Diet Cokes.
What number is diabetes now as far as like America? Is it number 2?
Half of adults have diabetes, and another quarter are developing it.
Right.
It's epidemic.
So the inputs that people are doing are not correct. Like they are not feeding themselves correctly.
It's a pandemic. An epidemic is a contained infection.
Yeah.
And a pandemic is worldwide.
Uh-huh.
Well, blood sugar control problems are worldwide.
Is that just because we have more access to sugar now?
Are
we eating sugar in response to stress? Like, what is it that why are people?
Grains are cheap. So a lot of grains are being eaten. And if they're not being, if our bodies require a fuel mixture, we require like a 2-cycle engine requires oil and gas mixture.
Or fire.
Humans require a mixture of protein, fat, and carb.
Now, why is there so much controversy right now about this? Like, why is like protein being demonized so heavily and vegan? Like, I know as far as planetary, like improving the condition of the planet, like not eating animal products, but like the vegan community is like very saying like eating protein causes some sort of acid buildup in the body and all this kind of stuff. Is that true?
Yeah, but not if you're healthy. And if you're deficient in protein, which most vegans are, that's not healthy.
Right.
And the only way you can tell is do a blood chemistry, see what your protein levels are.
Yeah, I've known a lot of vegetarians who 20 years later they go see the doctor and the doctor's like, whoa, like you're really not doing
Well,
so good.
I've looked at hundreds of vegetarian blood chemistries,
Yeah.
and they're almost always high in
What's
sugar, low in fat, and low in protein.
what's the number one complaint that everyone has?
No energy,
So would that directly
fatigue.
correlate with how we're eating and how we're treating ourselves? Like we're
Well,
stressed. We've mismanaged our digestive tract, and to the point where it's just not even giving us life-sustaining energy anymore.
our diet is the big one. Our rest patterns, not enough rest, insomnia, and not enough exercise, and then our thinking. When we think toxic thoughts, that's going to someday, if we ever started doing energetic medicine, we're in an energetic world right now. You know, ever since the nuclear bomb was developed. So we're, you know, in the technology, in the you know, social media, in the internet, you know, it's energy, and we're all vibrating, you know, higher and faster and faster. So the pace of life, what used to take 5 days, we can do in 5 minutes, and to actually, you know, produce something, we can do something in 10 days that would have taken 5 years. So we're at a rapid pace, and so that is stressing us out. But our toxic thoughts are especially our criticism of others, our blaming others, and our not taking responsibility for ourselves, and our not forgiving, for, you know, being entitled. So blame, primarily being critical of ourselves. So I'm not perfect. I'm not, I'm too fat. I'm too skinny. My teeth aren't right. You know, I'm not smart enough. You know, so we're critical of ourselves. So that's probably the biggest cause of disease, is our self-talk. If we have toxic, if we're blaming others or if we're blaming ourselves, then we're giving away our power. And our biggest power as a human being is our choices. And that's one of the neatest things, Stuart, that I learned when I figured I got to figure out, why are cancer people saying that they're healthy? What's going on?
Mm.
And I saw that they had gotten used to being sick. So we don't grow out of our childhood illnesses, we grow used to them. And so we get used to being sick, and so we really don't know what health is. But the most important thing I realized was that it's our daily choices that add up. Because what I saw was, when I do testing and I get people dialed into a corrective pattern, that within 3 weeks, we saw stage 4 cancer patients that had been around the world that were convinced they were dying. You and I got to see people respond in 3 and 4 weeks, where they thought they were healthy, and where their energy came back, their eyes got bright, they were having good digestion, they were sleeping, their skin was glowing, their hair wasn't falling out, their symptoms were disappearing. So if you can take somebody that's tried cancer therapies for 3 or 4 years, chemo, radiation, and surgery, none of it has worked. They come as a last resort, and you see them improve in a 4-week period. Boy, that tells you something. And I've seen it now over a 20-year period of treating hundreds and hundreds of people. I see amazing improvement fairly rapidly. Now, it doesn't mean that your body heals in a matter of months, but you can remove the burden, and the body starts to heal, and you're in a healing process. So what we now need to do is use this crisis as a wake-up call that we're making some mistakes. We need to slow down. We need to reflect on what we're doing. We need to start paying attention to everyone's health, not just our own. And that's economically, you know, social justice, you know, just economic justice, all of these things that have contributed to where we're at. We need to re-examine, slow down, and like I used to say with the cancer patients, you have to transform your life. So this corona is a wake-up call for humanity to transform. We're out of balance. So we need to do that on a global level where we start paying attention to everyone, not just ourselves. We need to learn to look out for those people amongst us that need our help them. We need to realize that accumulation of goods is not the game of life. It's using what you have to help others. That's really the purpose of life. It's not to see who has the most cars or the biggest house or the biggest bank account. It's like, what can we do to spread the love? We need to learn to forgive ourselves and forgive others, to not judge others. This whole misinformation right now that's dividing everybody, nobody likes to be told what to do. But if we could direct people that, hey, wearing a mask is part of being human right now to prevent the spread and the death, to our community. It's, you're doing your part. It's a patriotic thing that you can do to help everyone. So the common good is looked at instead of the individual, goal of enriching yourself.
And that
And
was, and that would,
and it,
we could apply that to nature as well. But
yeah. And if people would look at a blood chemistry, they could look at antibodies that the body's producing, not just against corona, but against food. That'd be a big deal. Immunology is really cool. I mean, you can look and see if you've got a bacterial infection, but you got to know which antibody test to choose.
I think the testing is really, really interesting, and individually it makes sense. But like, what are the inputs that you could do to like eliminate, like, you know what I mean? Like, how do you just get people on a pathway that isn't going to require them later down the line to need to get tested?
Okay, number one is learn to love and forgive. Number two is to exercise. Number three is to control your blood sugar. Eat protein, fats, and carbohydrates in the right ratio. Eat at least 3 times a day. Don't eat within a half an hour to an hour of getting up.
Is that the number one way to eliminate stress on the body, is just eating?
Blood sugar control is pretty huge.
Yeah.
That's pretty huge.
I don't know
And
hardly anyone that I know, and I'm involved in the health community, and nobody really focuses on this. I hang out with friends and I'm like, aren't you guys hungry? Like, they're just running off pure like stoke. Like, we're just gonna do all these things, and like no one's thinking about food. No one's thinking about like, hey, who's gonna make the meal? It's like, and then by the time people do eat, they're just tired and exhausted and cranky, and like they're just done. And it's like little kids still. People are like not, adults are still not taking care of themselves. It's kind of,
our bodies can store energy and then dole it out
later.
But that's very not very cost effective.
I always say it's like you have two engines. You have one that requires calories that you can continuously feed and stoke, and then you have your backup engine, which is your hormone engine. And it's like, if you rely on that backup engine all the time, then you're wearing it out. It's like a smaller engine, and that's what people are doing essentially, is like relying on this stored energy rather than like running on current energy. And that's what's wearing us out and stressing us out. Is that
there's a misconception about the keto diet.
Mm.
And the intermittent fasting.
A lot of friends will say that intermittent fasting has helped them in the way of their digestive tract. Like when their gut is messed up from all the foods, they'll do a small fast and then they'll feel better. And it's I see how that is valid, but the flip side of that is just don't eat the stuff that makes your body need, like, don't do the thing that is going to make you need to fast.
Well, that I've been fasting since I was 19.
Yeah, once a year.
And but I don't do it ever for less than 10 days.
Yeah.
And I just drink water.
Yeah.
And that after 3 days, you use the stored sugars in your blood and in your muscles in the first 3 days. And your body, during those 3 days, your adrenals are what are causing the gluconeogenesis, meaning that we're releasing stored sugars. And cortisol is produced by your adrenals, which then stimulates your liver and glucagon, and your pancreas all gets involved in releasing what's been stored. That's very intensive energy, expensive. You're using a lot of energy. And after 3 days of not eating, where that stored sugar has been utilized, the immediately available stored sugar, then you start what's called self-autolysis. You start to digest your own tissue, and you start with fat. And so you start burning fat. That's where you start seeing ketones, right? If you're burning fat, you're seeing ketones in your urine. And that process can go on for 30 or 40 days until you've run out of fat. Then you start burning your muscles. And after that, you start burning your organs. And then it becomes painful. So you can not eat anything for 45 days and do pretty darn good. I've done 2 30-day fasts.
There's a guy who like was several hundred pounds and he fasted for like a month and like lost all.
But I can, so yeah, if you've got that much fat reserves, you can do that. But I don't fast people that are unhealthy.
Yeah.
Because fast is a quick fix.
Well, that's what everyone's looking for. Everyone wants these like,
there is no such thing.
So people need to slow down, reflect on what they're doing, and then start utilizing the correct inputs.
Yeah.
To build health.
If you eat the right protein, fats, and carbs, you don't have to store and release your energy. And that's called efficiency. That's called long life. That's called disease prevention.
There's also the theory that you don't overeat, and overeating is actually what's causing a shortening of life as well. Like too much processing of food.
Yeah, yeah. And when you overeat, it's usually because you're starving.
Yeah.
So again, you got to keep in mind that the body never makes a mistake. If you're fat, the reason you're fat is that you're starving, because your intestinal tract is clogged up. It's like you got a gas filter that's clogged up, so your engine's not getting gas. Even though you got a full tank, your engine dies because your filter's clogged.
Is it clogged or is it just inflamed and it can't even process what's going on?
Same thing.
Yeah.
But food is not being digested and absorbed across the intestinal wall, so the body sees itself as starving. So then your liver, your pancreas, and your adrenals get to work, and you start converting what you eat into fat to save up for the famine.
Mm-hmm.
So fat people are starving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you clean up the intestine, then they lose their fat. But if you starve a starving person, with body, whatever it's called.
There's so many.
Yeah.
What is that one that everyone went to, like Jenny Craig or something?
Yeah. And then there's Weight Watchers.
Weight Watchers.
Where you starve yourself, with calorie restrictions. That's not the way to go.
Yeah, you nourish yourself. I always use the analogy, like treat yourself like a newborn baby. Like you don't, as an adult, you're the same organism as you were then. Like, why as an adult do you think that you can just like forego eating or eat sugar or not rest, or you know what I mean? Just go.
Newborn babies are on a schedule.
Yeah, same with
schedule.
And it's like you can, because your battery is a little bit bigger and you can withgo these things, but to do it daily without any kind of like thinking of, your inputs. I've been using that word a lot lately, is like, what are your inputs? Like, what are you doing on a daily basis that is helping you sustain life,
And the other part of that is your inputs and
exports.
Exports, yeah. And that's your thinking.
Yeah.
If you're toxic thinking, if you're judging yourself or judging others or being a victim and living in your woe, we're supposed to, not live in our mistakes. I think Nelson Mandela said that I never lose. I either, I win or I learn.
Nice.
I never lose.
Well, I think like the original story of knowledge of good and evil, like in the Garden of Eden when we're with God, Like you're in this bliss. And as soon as you take that bite full of knowledge of good and evil, you start judging, criticizing, and you get thrown out of the garden with God. And that's the whole thing. Is like um if
Was that God? What was that ring?
yeah, it was
Was
Lily.
God calling?
Totally. Like, if you're criticizing, you're missing out. Like
You
you're
got it right again.
yeah, ding ding.
You know,
Um,
if we're more sick by what comes out of our mouth than what we put in our mouth.
yeah,
That's how important forgiveness is.
yeah,
And if we give away our power, which is our ability to make choices. So right now we need to wrap this up, because I mean we've solved pretty much everything
the whole world's problem.
that you can think of, But if you give up your power, like right now, people are scared, terrified.
Yeah,
No money, no job, ay, ay, ay. Pretty scary. What normally happens is that we try to go back to where we were. We need to move forward. We need to move through this. We need to think of new solutions that we've never thought of before. And we need to make comprehensive, cognizant new choices. And those choices are liberation. And it's either fate or destiny. Fate is when you kind of give up and oh geez. Destiny is when you say, no, I don't think that's the way it's going to happen. I'm facing a problem here. I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to tune in. Instead of tuning into Google, try tuning into your intuition.
yeah.
And your intuition will guide you, yes or no, way better than Google. So, that artificial intelligence, I think, will never compete with,
Well,
a
true.
person who's tuned into their intuition.
My whole thing was like, people have a really difficult time listening to one another, and like someone could be so tuned in and they'll fucking kill them. But Google is like a computer, and like people somehow give trust to inanimate objects, whereas a human, it's like they'll judge each other. But like a computer, it's like, so it's the same thing. Yes, it's intuition. We have it already, but like for people to really get behind it, it's like, okay, maybe they can get behind a computer easier.
I dig it. I mean, I would love for some sensible solutions to be illuminating our choices. Right now, we have anything but illumination leading us.
Yeah.
We need to recognize, just like if you've got an infection, recognize what's the underlying problem. What's the underlying problem to corona? It's injustice. It's resource depletion. It's not caring about others. It's self-interest.
So
It's
what can people do to like prevent the continued spread? Like, what are some action steps that people can take?
Learn how to control your blood sugar. Study the glycemic index. Don't eat the same food every day. That's huge, which nobody ever talks about. That is one of the most powerful things that you can do as a human, is don't eat the same food. And it would take a little while to explain why.
Yeah.
I'm getting to the point where I try to teach people everything that I know. It doesn't work too good.
No, because
So and you've always said, and Charlie's always said, just tell people what to do. And that's kind of what I'm getting to that point. I think it's important. I mean, I spend so many hours teaching people how to control their blood sugar.
there's some people that want to dive deep, and there's some people that just don't even have the capacity to do so.
Yeah,
and,
so just
and the
tell them
time.
what to do.
Yeah.
Give them a package.
And that's why they're paying you as an expert to like lead them. They're not in the school to become what you are. They just want your expertise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So rotate your diet, control your blood sugar, exercise for at least a half hour a day, even if it's just walking, for 30 minutes.
Mm.
Sleep well, eat right before you go to bed. Because usually what interrupts people's sleep is that they go low blood sugar. It's called the adrenal.
So many people I know have a hard time sleeping.
It's called the adrenal alarm.
Yeah.
And that has to do with controlling your blood sugar. So, it's best to eat 6 times a day. Eat within a half hour of getting up, eat 2 hours later, eat lunch, eat 2 hours later, eat dinner, and have a bedtime snack. That's the best way to eat.
That's what I do. Love
So
it.
do that, exercise, learn to forgive. That's a tricky one. It took me many, many years to learn how to forgive.
How do you do it?
And you don't judge in the first place. You
Mm,
realize that we're not our mistakes. If somebody makes a mistake, that's not who they are. They're a child of God. We're all children of God. No one goes to hell as a result of the mistakes that we make. We're all eternal. And so, forgiveness is seeing that, whoever made the mistake is still a child of God. And you need to protect yourself against those mistakes and not associate with those kinds of people. But to judge them and is wrong. And mostly important is to don't judge yourself for your own failures.
mm-hmm.
That's where we really, really go wrong.
And that's the ego
And
kind of
take care of
associating
other
with the
people.
ego. Yeah.
Look what you can do to help others. Realize that but by the grace of God, there go I. That homeless person, help them out.
They are you.
Mm-hmm.
I always,
and we could be them before we even knew it. And no one ever thought they were going to be homeless.
yeah.
It could happen to us. I've worked with the homeless, so I know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird that as a society, we allow that stuff to just like float, even though it brings everyone down, like racism, sexism, like homelessness, like inequality brings everyone down. Yet
we're all one.
Yeah, but yet we still like kind of allow it to fester rather than be like, hey, let's make our world even better by like addressing these things rather than like pushing them off.
That's what the lessons of this pandemic are. We all had time to chill. We had time out in our home.
There's so many memes going on. It's like, for the first time, you actually had time to like reflect, and you just couldn't do it, and you just had to learn how to bake bread for the first time in your life. Like you just couldn't sit with yourself, and it's true.
And now that things are starting to loosen up, you're kind of going, that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
When there was no noise out there, when the pollution was decreased,
yeah.
When you had time to actually spend time with your loved ones. We all want to get back to normal.
No.
Boy, we are crazy, huh?
Yeah, just addicted to our routine.
So I'm thinking I'm going to reduce my rates. I was thinking about increasing them because what I do is pretty invaluable. But for people that are really sick, then it might take some work. But for general tune-ups for people, I'm looking to reduce my rates and to offer people a comprehensive blood chemistry and an hour of my time to interpret it and tell people what it means for like $300.
Could you just create a lot of videos online explaining all this stuff in depth, and then you could do a one-on-one consultation? But like for the most part, I'm
working on a website.
It's repetition that creates anything. It's consistency, and so hearing it once isn't gonna sink in. People are not gonna download it so easily, but to do it again, read the same book, read the same information. The repetition, the consistency of your actions. That's what leads to going somewhere.
Knowledge. I agree. Well, you can help me. I've got an appointment tomorrow to work on a website where I'll have that kind of content available.
Yeah.
So that's my job now, is to start preparing for my consult tomorrow and try to get that up and running.
Cool.
But I feel like we covered this pretty comprehensively. I hope pretty clearly. And that we gave some action steps. And but it really has to do with transforming how you are, making better choices.
I think the thing for a lot of people is just slowing down. I don't think anyone's ever really taken the time to reflect on their actions and what the effects of their actions are. Like, I think a lot of people are kind of just running wild, running socially, just doing what everyone else is doing. And I find it really difficult personally to like find time where someone's not calling me, someone's not showing up, someone doesn't want my time. And like, I crave it all the time where I can just like, I don't want any obligations. but there's always like somebody like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? What's going on? Like always. I'm not calling anyone. People are just like, and I think that's how a lot of people spend their life, is just socially just like active all the time. And that doesn't exactly allow you to reflect. It doesn't let you look at what you're doing and what the effects are and how you can make changes. And
there's consequences to making poor decisions.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But we can heal. It's pretty neat. You've seen it probably more than most people. Most people don't see what we saw.
Yeah.
And if it can happen with stage 4 cancers, it can happen with a whole lot of other illnesses way before then.
It's happening so much more now that the internet is spreading this like health consciousness. I think like people are really waking up. It's just unfortunate that what we're being directed to isn't really as comprehensive as it needs to be. I think that's kind of a bummer in my mind. You know, knowing what I know and then seeing what is being spread around is kind of like, it's like cheap.
You got to see what it's like on my end.
Yeah.
Where I get records from people of famous doctors that they've gone to and not gotten well, and I see what those famous doctors are actually recommending. It's quite disturbing.
Yeah.
So I wish somehow or another, I mean, I've learned all this from other people, but I've been doing it for 40 years.
Well, I hope just like us putting ourselves out there and just continuing, you know, to want to help. I think it'll just, yeah, snowball into a, you know, just a method where we can.
Well, there are, you know, I've spent many decades finding the best nutrients that are made.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's Douglas Laboratories, it's Pure Encapsulations, and it's Ceroil.
Mm-hmm.
And people can go on Amazon and find those products and at least get quality products that are, because most vitamins and minerals sold are really lousy. Most
Cheap
of them.
crap.
Over 95% is lousy. The problem in somebody doing that hasn't gotten testing is they don't really know what to take.
Yeah.
But I could recommend for people to help their immune system, I'd recommend, you know, buffered vitamin C. I'd recommend a good multiple vitamin mineral. I'd recommend colloidal minerals or liquid minerals on top of that. I would recommend a probiotic, of which there's only 3 companies, but Ceroil is one of them that makes a good probiotic. I'd recommend an ultra antioxidant. I'd recommend an herbal antimicrobial. And just those 6 products would help boost your immune system, even if you're making all the wrong choices.
Mm.
You know, but when people are really sick and have gone to doctor after doctor and have been sick for decades, then you got to get the 4-wheel drive and the winch.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just jack up a tire.
Right. You got to pull them out of the mud.
Yeah, and at that point, if you get that synergy working, then there's nothing that can't be healed.
Yeah, that's
So,
really
you know, and people will spend $10,000 on a new sofa,
neat.
but if they're paying $500 a month for insurance, boy, are they ever cheap. They'll spend thousands of dollars on their pets.
Well,
But
I think
asking people to spend a few $1,000 on themselves, a few $1,000 to find answers and to be healthy after searching for decades and living with being unhealthy. But it's pretty surprising that I'm not overwhelmed.
Do something that requires them to actually change, you know, like take action steps. The sofa, they can just enjoy. It's there and they get instant pleasure. You're saying, hey, like things you're doing aren't right, and yeah, let's make some changes. Spend all this money and let's make some changes. Yeah. And the truth is people don't really love themselves anyways. You know, they're almost like whipping themselves. Like the Catholic is like, I'm such a sinner. And that's, I think, how a lot of people feel about themselves is they don't have a lot of self-love. They don't have a lot of self-worth. And so asking them to invest in themselves before they, you know, before they're ready, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of,
Most people don't know what it's like to have energy and clarity and feel good.
yeah, yeah, I was one of them. Totally. It's life-changing once you finally do unlock the code. Once you finally do get clear, you're like, wow, I mean, I remember how I was existing before, and it's kind of like zombie-like, and your senses are, you're almost like you're like shrunken inside of your body rather than like really accepting of the environment. You're kind of just like in this protective mode. And so I mean, I get it, and I'm very sympathetic for where people are at. And then when people do make up the excuses why they can't, it's like, okay, I totally, I mean, the hardest thing that you do is get people to summon the strength to make the changes. It's not you know what I mean? Like the information is there, but it's like, are you going to apply it? And that requires like a change of mindset. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's difficult.
that's what I learned in 1985 was that the way you motivate people to change is with hard copy data.
Mm,
That's why I do medical tests. I don't do
mm,
muscle testing. I don't look at symptoms. I don't look at history.
mm,
I want some objective science where if I drew blood from you every day for a month and sent it to Quest, I'd get the same results every day.
mm.
And if I say, hey, do this because these are high and these are low, we could repeat those chemistries in 3 months and they'd be changed.
And that's what helps people motivate themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. So like some of the people that you sent me that are really, really sick, that are getting well now, you know, they can't wait to do their next test.
Nice. Because they've like, I've done the things. Now I get to see the results.
Yeah. And and having done them, I can't imagine recommending people do stuff without an objective test to prove whether or not what you suggested worked or not. And
Why do you
that,
think there's
that
so much misinformation in the health world? Like, why do you think so many people get into it and then don't like get really in depth with it and just like sell these off products and sell these like half-ass conclusions to people? Like, why is that? Is it the same?
I looked at somebody in third grade, my good friend Joe, just did a test, and I looked at him and he had a D. And I went, Joe, why don't you get it? Beats me.
There's no answer. Yeah. Yeah.
I've gone to lots of doctors, chiropractors that didn't do a very good job.
Yeah.
And, I've been to a lot of attorneys that didn't do a very good job. I had a lot of teachers that weren't very good teachers. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there's, maybe 1 out of 10 professional people that are excellent. 1 out of 10. 90% of them aren't. Most people go to those that aren't. They get used to being sick. They get used to having lousy results. The medical profession using toxic drugs to cover up symptoms. What a ruse that is. And they continue to do it because if they don't, they're no longer doctors.
Imagine if the medical profession didn't exist and people just had these health problems and just like people would just be falling off dead, right?
Well,
Without
the third leading cause of death after heart disease and cancer is prescription drugs in hospitals.
Is that anesthesiology or is that
No, that's
medication complications?
dirty hospitals and medication complications. It's not malpractice.
Mm,
And you can look it up in the Lancet. You can look it up. 2 doctors at Johns Hopkins just did that for over 30 years. That's been known. And so that's 300,000 people in America. How many people have died from corona so far? 80, maybe 85,000. And we're all up in arms and freaking out. But
yeah.
meanwhile, every year, 300,000 people are killed by taking medicine.
Yeah.
prescribed by licensed doctors.
Yeah. Pretty dangerous. Yeah. And all the while, life is supposed to be self-maintained.
Self-regulating and self-healing. It is.
Yeah.
But you can't take poisons for medicine. You can't drink. You can't smoke. You can't get no sleep. You can't eat junk food. We talked to some people that just got back from New Zealand, and if you've ever talked to anybody that went to New Zealand,
Yeah, they
they're
love it.
so crazy. It's not, it's like settle down.
Yeah.
But the thing that I heard, which was the most exciting ever, is that there's no industrial food in New Zealand.
There's no processed food.
There's no processed food in New Zealand. The restaurants don't serve it to you. You don't buy it in grocery stores. I went, what? Because I just watched a show on blood sugar control on PBS. It made me mad.
It wasn't in depth.
Oh, there were hormone doctors, that knew about diabetes, but no one listens to them. I can relate to that. I mean, nobody listens to me either. And so I can relate to that. So they were teaching people in the communities to get the word out there, thinking that was the answer. The only answer for diabetes is for food companies to not sell junk. As long as they sell junk, people are going to buy it. So we got to stop. And that's the only way to solve the diabetes problem. Because people don't have the self-control to avoid their
Craving.
Doritos, their donuts, their breads, their beers, their chocolates.
I have a friend who's like gluten-free, but yet he still drinks beer. And I'm just like,
gluten is in beer.
Like, you're not gluten. Well, it's just like a cut down, but it's like you're drinking an isolated gluten.
Which is more, when it's dissolved in alcohol, it's 100 times worse than if you eat the bread.
Yeah. So yeah, self-control, discipline. I think that's like the secret with everything, is like consistency and knowing what you're going for and why you're going for it. But yeah, so many people are just kind of floating around out there and thinking the world is safe. I think thinking the government is safe, thinking the food is safe. Someone out there is protecting me, and it's like, no, not to the degree that you would protect your child.
How do you like those signs in hardware stores and grocery stores? There are elements in this store that are known to cause cancer.
Yeah.
That makes you feel safe, doesn't it?
Right. It's on like food packaging. I mean, it's in everything. I know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing how to navigate the modern world and not succumb to all the modern problems.
It's more important than ever that we dive deep. The only safety is in spirit. The only safety is into your own intuition. And it's a scary world. The people are terrified about this. Well, they should be terrified about climate change, quite frankly. I know you don't want me to talk about that, because I've been terrified of it for 50 years and warning people. And the reason why we're in this health crisis right now is it's climate change.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's causing the corona to go crazy. And, we've not taken action on it. We're in denial about that, just like people are in denial that this is a made-up virus and the virus isn't going to kill you. It's the fear of the virus that's going to kill you, or this was man-made and it's not so bad. Hospitals aren't overwhelmed. It's no worse than the flu. All these things that people say that are wrong, and they don't know what a virus is. They've never taken a class in physiology or chemistry. They don't know what they're talking about, but they're all experts because they heard it on Google. So
Yeah.
it's
The power of propaganda. It's real.
So the only solution, is to slow down. For those of us that are conscious, slow down. We're healthy, so you don't have to be afraid of getting corona. And, share and help others with as much as we possibly can.
Totally.
Have integrity. Don't lie.
Yeah.
Don't lie to yourself, and don't live in your victimhood. You know, took me decades to figure that one out, but I have, and you know, I'm liberated now.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, and that's the only protection we have. We it's true. We could die in a car accident tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, so enjoy your life. Wake up and be grateful for another day. You'll never have another day like you have today. I'll never have another conversation like the one that we're having. You know, I mean, we'll do more conversations, but we'll never repeat this. You'll
Yeah.
never have that great breakfast you had this morning.
Yeah.
And
That was,
you're gonna have a great day the rest of the day. You get to go to a mock wedding, and you
yeah.
get to go surfing.
Yeah. The waves are double overhead right now. So
Is Lily here?
she's in town.
Oh,
She's
I thought you
texting.
were looking around like you got a big smile on your face, like Lily just came in.
I'm just thinking about getting out there. The waves are peaking at like 12, which I think it's probably around that. It's 11 right now, and the winds are supposed to stay nice. And yeah, and then
Yeah, so enjoy every day. Have an attitude of gratitude,
yeah,
and you know, just spread the love,
totally,
help
yeah,
others.
yeah.
So,
It's spread good ideas, spread good information, spread good vibes.
so
Totally.
I think if we had like 10-minute conversations, you know, that would be a good idea.
About like one topic,
Mm-hmm,
and just got really in depth about like one scenario.
mm-hmm. And I think we can do that.
Yeah, I think totally. And I think we just upload them on YouTube and just start spreading information.
Mm-hmm.
That would be fun. All right,
Okay.
we'll sayonara. Signing off.
Get...
I feel your warmth through the screen.
Yeah. The aloha spirit. Well, I love you, Stuart.
I love you too, Dad.
I'm glad you're so healthy and happy, and I'm glad you're so clear.
Thanks, man.
It's really, I like how you study. I like what you're focused. I think you're doing extraordinarily well.
Thanks. I want to. I think when I was a little kid, I wanted to figure out what life was about, and I think that I've somehow done that.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is life meant for?
And it will continually inform you.
Yeah.
And it's always changing.
Yeah. Gets better and better.
Well, you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thanks, man. Appreciate all
Okay.
the sharing of information, and yeah, thanks for tackling this coronavirus topic. And yeah, for people listening, hopefully some clarity was had. And
I didn't think anybody else was on the call.
not yet. No, nobody's listening.
Okay. All right. I thought this was just between you and me, man.
It is, yeah. I didn't share it yet. All right, I love you.
Love you too.
Talk soon.
Okay. Aloha.
Aloha.